When a grieving mechanic's 3-year ritual of feeding a ghost is interrupted by a desperate mother and her hungry son, his quiet penance becomes a lightning rod for gossip, violence, and a choice he never saw coming. Caleb Hayes thought the worst night of his life was behind him, until the man who beats children shows up at his door with a smile like a loaded gun. This is a story about the meals we share with the dead, the strangers who become family, and the moment when running stops being an option. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The clock above the counter read 9:47 p.m. when Caleb Hayes pushed through the door of Marlene's diner, bringing with him the smell of engine grease and November cold. The bell chimed, a sound so familiar it had stopped registering as noise years ago, and Marlene herself glanced up from wiping down the far end of the counter, her lined face softening into something between sympathy and routine. "Caleb," she said, her voice carrying the particular gentleness people reserve for the visibly broken. "Marlene." He nodded once, hands deep in the pockets of his canvas jacket, and moved toward the corner booth by the window. The vinyl seat exhaled beneath his weight. Outside, the street was empty except for the occasional car drifting past, headlights slicing through the dark like something searching. Marlene didn't ask what he wanted. She never did. Not anymore. 3 years. 3 years of Friday nights, same booth, same time, give or take 15 minutes depending on whether the last job of the day fought him. 3 years of ordering 2 plates of meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans. 3 years of eating one and watching the other go cold. The ritual had a shape now, a weight. It lived in his chest like a stone he'd swallowed and couldn't cough up, but it was the only hour of the week when he still felt like a father, even if fatherhood had become a one-sided conversation with an empty seat. Marlene brought the plates without ceremony, set them down with the soft clink of ceramic on formica. The first plate she placed in front of Caleb. The second she set across from him, steam still rising from the gravy, and she did not meet his eyes when she did it. "Anything else, hun?" "No, ma'am. Thank you." She walked away, and Caleb picked up his fork. Across from him, the meatloaf sat untouched. It always did. He would sit here for an hour, maybe a little more, eating slowly, pretending the silence across the table was companionable instead of crushing, pretending that if he just kept showing up, kept setting a place, kept honoring the shape of what used to be, then maybe it wouldn't feel so much like drowning. He cut into the meatloaf, chewed, tasted nothing. The diner was nearly empty tonight. A trucker 2 booths down, head bent over a newspaper. An older couple near the door splitting a piece of pie. The fluorescent lights hummed their monotonous song. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the glass. Caleb's phone sat face down on the table beside his water glass. He never checked it during this hour. This time was sacred in the only way he understood sacred anymore. Not holy, just uninterrupted. An hour when the world couldn't ask him to fix anything, couldn't remind him of what he'd failed to fix 3 years ago. He was halfway through his meal when the door opened again. The bell chimed and the cold swept in, and Caleb glanced up out of reflex. A woman stood in the doorway, thin and pale, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had mostly come undone. She wore a denim jacket too light for the weather and jeans with a hole in one knee. But it was her eyes that stopped him, wide, darting, the kind of eyes that expected the world to hit back. Beside her, barely reaching her hip, stood a boy, maybe 5, maybe 6, small for his age with a mop of brown hair and a blue backpack that looked like it held everything he owned. The woman's hand rested on the boy's shoulder, fingers tight, protective. She scanned the diner like she was memorizing exits. Marlene stepped out from behind the counter, dish towel still in hand, her expression shifting into something cautious and kind. "Evening, just the 2 of you?" The woman hesitated. Her throat worked. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, and Caleb had to strain to hear it over the hum of the lights. "My son's hungry," she said. Can we stay a while? Just to get warm?" There was something in the way she asked, like she expected to be told no, like she'd been told no 100 times before and was bracing for it again. Marlene's face softened further. "Of course, sweetheart, sit anywhere you like." But the woman didn't move. She looked around again, and Caleb saw it then. The way her gaze lingered on the door, the way her shoulders stayed hunched, the way she positioned herself between the boy and the rest of the room. She was running from something or someone. The boy tugged on her sleeve. "Mama," he whispered, and his voice was so small, so tired, that something in Caleb's chest cracked open. The woman bent down, murmured something Caleb couldn't hear, and then straightened again. She still hadn't moved toward a table. Marlene glanced at Caleb, just for a second, and there was a question in her eyes. Caleb didn't think, he just acted. "They're with me," he said, loud enough to carry. Every head in the diner turned. The woman's eyes snapped to him, startled, maybe afraid. Caleb gestured to the booth. "Sit, please." For a long moment, she didn't move, just stared at him like she was trying to decide if he was a threat or a lifeline. Then the boy tugged on her sleeve again, and something in her resolve crumbled. She crossed the diner slowly, the boy's hand clutched in hers, and slid into the booth across from Caleb. The boy sat beside her, his backpack still on, his eyes enormous. Up close, Caleb could see the shadows under the woman's eyes, the way her hands shook when she set them on the table. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. "Thank you," she whispered. Caleb nodded. He didn't know what to say. Didn't know why he'd said anything in the first place, except that the kid's voice, Mama, had sounded so much like another voice, from another time, and his body had moved before his brain caught up. He looked down at the second plate, the untouched meatloaf, the mashed potatoes going cold. He pushed it across the table. "Eat," he said. The boy's eyes went wide. He looked up at his mother and she looked at Caleb, and for a second nobody moved. She started, but Caleb shook his head. "It's just going to waste otherwise." That was a lie, and they both knew it, but she didn't call him on it. "Milo," she said softly, and the boy, Milo, looked at her. "What do you say?" "Thank you," Milo whispered, and then he picked up the fork and started eating like the food might disappear if he didn't. Caleb watched him for a moment, something uncomfortable twisting in his gut, and then made himself look away, focused on his own plate. But he couldn't taste anything anymore. Marlene came by a few minutes later with a glass of water for the woman and a glass of milk for Milo. She set them down gently, gave Caleb a look he couldn't quite read, and walked away without a word. The diner settled back into its rhythms. The trucker left. The couple finished their pie. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Caleb ate in silence. The woman, he still didn't know her name, sat very still, her hands wrapped around the water glass like she was trying to absorb its warmth. Milo ate steadily, methodically, scraping every last bit of food off the plate. When he was done, he set down the fork and looked up at Caleb. "That was really good," he said seriously. "Thank you." Caleb's throat tightened. "You're welcome." Milo leaned against his mother, and she put an arm around him, and Caleb saw the way she held him, like he was the only thing in the world that mattered, like she would burn the whole planet down to keep him safe. He recognized that kind of love. He'd felt it once. "I'm Lena," the woman said quietly. "Lena Ward. This is Milo." "Caleb Hayes?" She nodded like she was filing the name away. "Do you come here often?" "Fridays," Caleb said. "Every Friday?" "Same booth?" "Same booth." She looked at the empty plate in front of her, then back at him, and something flickered across her face. Understanding, maybe. Or pity. He wasn't sure which was worse. "I'm sorry if we interrupted," she said. "You didn't." Another lie, but a kinder one. Lena glanced toward the door again, and Caleb saw the fear come back into her eyes, saw the way her shoulders tensed. "You got somewhere to go tonight?" he asked. She flinched, looked down at her hands. "We'll figure it out," she said, but her voice had no conviction in it. Milo yawned, his whole body curling into it, and Lena's grip on him tightened. Caleb shouldn't have cared, didn't want to care. He'd come here to sit with his ghosts, not to collect new responsibilities. But the kid was so small, and the woman looked so tired, and the wind outside was getting colder. "I've got a back room," Caleb heard himself say. "At my shop. It's not much, but it's warm, dry. There's a couch. You could stay there, just for tonight. Lena's head snapped up. What? Just for tonight, Caleb repeated, already regretting the offer but unable to take it back. It's not far, 5-minute drive. I don't... She shook her head. We can't. Why not? Because I don't know you. Because you don't know us. Because... She stopped, her voice cracking, and Milo looked up at her with worried eyes. Caleb leaned back in the booth. You're right. You don't know me. But it's freezing outside and your boy's tired, and unless you've got a better plan, you're going to be sleeping in your car. If you've even got a car. Lena's jaw tightened. We'll manage. I'm sure you will, Caleb said, but you don't have to. She stared at him for a long time, and he could see her running through the calculations. Risk versus reward, danger versus desperation. He'd seen that look before, on the faces of stray dogs deciding whether to trust the hand offering food. Finally, she said, Why? Caleb didn't have a good answer. Didn't have any answer that made sense. Because somebody should, he said. It was Milo who decided it. He looked up at his mother and said, in that small, tired voice, I'm cold, Mama. Lena's eyes closed. When she opened them again, the fight had gone out of them. Okay, she whispered. Just for tonight. The shop was a squat cinder block building on the edge of town, wedged between a used car lot and an empty field. A hand-painted sign above the garage door read, Hayes Automotive in fading letters. Caleb pulled his truck into the gravel lot and killed the engine. Lena sat in the passenger seat, Milo asleep in her lap, his head resting against her shoulder. She'd been silent the whole drive, her eyes fixed on the passing streetlights, her body tense as a drawn bowstring. We're here, Caleb said quietly. Lena looked at the building, then at him. This is your shop? Has been for 8 years. He climbed out of the truck and unlocked the side door, flipping on the lights as he stepped inside. The main bay smelled like motor oil and metal. Tools hung neatly on pegboards. A half-disassembled engine sitting on a workbench in the corner. It wasn't much, but it was clean, organized, a place where things made sense. Lena followed him in, carrying Milo, who didn't wake. Caleb led them through the bay to a small door at the back. Beyond it was a room barely bigger than a closet, couch, mini-fridge, a space heater, a sink. He'd slept here himself more than once, on nights when going home felt like too much work. Bathroom's through there, Caleb said, nodding toward another door. Shower works. Towels are in the cabinet. There's some canned soup in the fridge if you get hungry. Lena set Milo down on the couch, and he curled up immediately, still asleep. She pulled a thin blanket from her backpack and draped it over him, her hands lingering on his shoulder. When she turned back to Caleb, her eyes were wet. I don't know how to thank you, she said. You don't have to. I do, because this... She gestured around the room, her voice breaking. Nobody does this. Nobody just helps. Caleb looked away, uncomfortable. It's just a room. It's not just a room, Lena said fiercely. It's everything. He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing, just nodded and moved toward the door. Lock this behind me, he said. Don't open it for anyone. I'll be back in the morning. Lena nodded, wiping at her eyes. Caleb? He stopped, hand on the doorknob. Why did you really do this? Caleb looked back at Milo, asleep on the couch, and for a second he saw a different boy, a different couch, a different life. Because somebody should, he said again, and left before she could ask anything else. The next morning, Caleb arrived at the shop just after dawn. He half expected the back room to be empty, Lena and Milo gone like they'd never been there at all. But when he unlocked the door, he found them both awake. Lena folding the blanket, Milo sitting on the couch with his backpack in his lap. Morning, Caleb said. Morning, Lena replied. She looked better than she had last night, still tired, still wary, but not quite so fragile. We were just getting ready to go. Go where? She hesitated. I don't know yet, but we can't stay here. Why not? Because you already did enough, because we're not your problem. Didn't say you were. Lena crossed her arms, defensive. Look, I appreciate what you did. I really do, but we can take care of ourselves. Caleb leaned against the doorframe. You got a job? I'm working on it. You got money? Her jaw tightened. I'll figure it out. Uh-huh. Caleb glanced at Milo, who was watching them with big, worried eyes. You eaten yet? We're fine. That's not what I asked. Lena's shoulders sagged. No, we haven't eaten. Caleb nodded. Come on. Marlene's opens at 6. I'll buy you breakfast, and then we'll talk about what happens next. Caleb, I'm not asking, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. I'm telling. Now come on before the eggs get cold. They sat in the same booth. Milo ordered pancakes and ate them with syrup dripping down his chin. Lena picked at scrambled eggs, her eyes still darting to the door every few minutes. Caleb drank his coffee and waited. Finally, Lena said, I can't pay you back. Didn't ask you to. I don't take charity. Good, because I'm not offering it. Caleb set down his mug. Marlene's looking for a waitress. Lunch and dinner shifts. Pays under the table if you need it that way. Lena stared at him. You talked to her about me? I asked if she needed help. She said yes. You want the job or not? Lena looked at Milo, then back at Caleb. Why are you doing this? Because you need it, Caleb said simply. And because I've got a room you're not using. You work, you save up, you get on your feet. That's it. No strings. There's always strings. Not with me. Lena studied him for a long time, searching for the lie, the angle, the catch. But Caleb just looked back at her, steady and patient, and eventually she let out a long breath. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, I'll take the job and the room, just until I get enough saved for a place. Fair enough. Milo grinned up at his mother, syrup on his nose, and Lena managed a small smile in return. Caleb paid the check and drove them back to the shop. Lena started at the diner that afternoon, and just for tonight, became something else entirely. The first week was awkward. Lena worked long shifts and Milo spent his afternoons in the shop doing homework at a little table Caleb set up in the corner. The kid was quiet, polite, and way too good at making himself invisible. He asked permission for everything, to use the bathroom, to get a drink of water, to turn on the space heater when he got cold. It made Caleb's chest ache. By the second week, Milo had started to relax. He'd wander over to watch Caleb work, asking questions about engines and tools in that earnest, curious way kids had. Caleb answered him without thinking, and somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling strange. Lena worked hard, harder than she needed to. She picked up extra shifts, saved every dollar, and didn't ask for anything. But Caleb saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she flinched at loud noises, the way she kept her phone close and checked it constantly, like she was waiting for bad news. She was still running, still afraid. Caleb didn't push, didn't ask questions. But he noticed, and the town noticed too. By the third week, people were talking. Caleb heard the whispers at the hardware store, saw the looks when he stopped for gas. Small towns had long memories and sharp tongues, and the sight of a single man letting a woman and her kid live in his shop was enough to set the gossip machine spinning. Caleb Hayes has got himself a girlfriend, someone said at the diner one night, loud enough for half the room to hear. Convenient, isn't it? Someone else replied. Pretty little thing like that shows up out of nowhere, and suddenly he's playing hero. Marlene shut that down fast, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. You got something to say it to his face. Otherwise, keep your mouth shut and eat your pie. The whispers didn't stop, but they got quieter. Caleb didn't care what people thought. He'd stopped caring about a lot of things 3 years ago. But he cared about Milo, who came home from the diner one day with his head down and his hands in his pockets. What's wrong? Caleb asked. Milo shrugged. Some lady said Mama and me were taking advantage of you. Caleb's jaw tightened. What lady? I don't know her name. She was mean. Yeah, well, people are mean sometimes. Doesn't make them right. Caleb crouched down so he was eye level with the kid. You and your mom aren't taking advantage of anyone. You hear me? Milo nodded, but he still looked upset. Hey, Caleb said. You know what I think? What? I think that lady's just mad because nobody ever taught her how to mind her own business. Milo's mouth twitched, almost a smile. There you go, Caleb said. Now come on. I need someone to hand me wrenches, and you're the best assistant I've got. Milo's smile grew, and he followed Caleb back to the workbench. Cheb. It was the fourth week when everything changed. Milo got sick. Just a cold at first, nothing serious. But kids didn't do just a cold, in Caleb's experience. They did fevers and coughs that sounded like they were coughing up a lung, and Milo was no exception. Lena tried to manage it herself, bought medicine from the drugstore, kept Milo bundled up, took his temperature every hour. But the fever wouldn't break, and by the third day the kid could barely keep his eyes open. Caleb found them in the back room that evening, Lena sitting on the couch with Milo's head in her lap, her hand on his forehead, her face pale and scared. "How high?" Caleb asked. 103.5, Lena whispered. "It won't come down. I don't know what to do." Caleb didn't hesitate. "We're going to the ER. I can't afford. Doesn't matter. Come on." He drove them to the hospital, carried Milo inside when the kid's legs gave out, and sat with Lena in the waiting room while the doctors ran tests. It turned out to be pneumonia, not life-threatening, but serious enough to need antibiotics and observation. When the nurse brought the bill, Lena stared at it like it was a death sentence. Caleb took it from her hands and walked to the front desk. "I'll cover it," he said. The receptionist blinked. "All of it?" "All of it." He paid with a credit card he rarely used, the numbers making his stomach turn, but he didn't let it show on his face. When he came back, Lena was crying. "I'll pay you back," she said. "No, you won't." "Caleb, I mean it, Lena. You're not paying me back. This isn't a loan. It's just what needed to happen." She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking, and Caleb stood there feeling useless and out of his depth. "Why?" she choked out. "Why do you keep doing this?" Caleb looked through the window into Milo's room, where the kid was asleep, an IV in his arm, his breathing finally steady. "Because somebody should," he said for the third time. The third, and this time, Lena didn't ask again. They brought Milo home 2 days later. He was weak but recovering, his smile slow but real. Lena hovered over him like a hawk, checking his temperature, making sure he took his medicine, barely sleeping. Caleb gave them space, kept the shop quiet, brought over soup from the diner without being asked. It was on the 5th day, when Milo was well enough to sit up and color at his little table, that Lena finally told Caleb the truth. They were in the main bay, Caleb working on an oil change, Lena leaning against the workbench with her arms crossed. She'd been quiet all morning, and Caleb had learned not to push. But then she said, "His name is Trent." Caleb's hand stilled on the wrench. "My husband," Lena continued, her voice flat. "Ex-husband, I guess, though the papers aren't signed. We've been separated for 6 months. I left him after he—" Her voice cracked. "After he hit Milo." Caleb's grip on the wrench tightened until his knuckles went white. "I should have left sooner," Lena said. "I should have left the first time he hit me, but I kept thinking he'd change. Kept thinking it was my fault, that if I just tried harder, if I was just better, he'd stop. And then one night, Milo spilled juice on the carpet, and Trent—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "He backhanded him, split his lip, and I knew if I stayed, one day he'd do worse." Caleb set down the wrench carefully, afraid of what he might do if he kept holding it. "So I packed a bag," Lena said, "took Milo, took what little money I had, and ran. We've been moving ever since, staying in shelters, sleeping in the car, whatever we could manage. I thought we were far enough away. I thought he wouldn't find us." "But," Caleb said quietly. "But he's been calling," Lena whispered. "Blocked numbers so I can't prove it's him. But I know. I know his voice. He says he just wants to talk. Says he's sorry. Says he wants his family back." Her hands were shaking now. "And I'm terrified that one day I'll turn around and he'll just be there." Caleb's jaw clenched. "You file for a restraining order? With what proof? The bruises healed months ago. I never took pictures, never went to the police. I was too scared, and now there's nothing to show for it except my word against his." "Your word should be enough." Lena laughed bitterly. "You'd think. But Trent's got a good job, a nice smile, and a way of making people believe him. I'm just the unstable wife who ran off with his kid." Caleb was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady and sure. "He shows up here," Caleb said. "He's going to regret it." Lena looked at him, her eyes wide and wet. You don't have to. I know, Caleb said, but I'm telling you anyway. You and Milo are safe here, and if that bastard wants to change that, he's going to have to go through me first. Lena's face crumpled, and she turned away, pressing her palms against the workbench. I don't know why you're doing this, she said, her voice breaking. I don't know what I did to deserve. You don't have to deserve it, Caleb said. It's just what's right. Lena nodded, wiping at her eyes, and for the first time since she'd walked into the diner that Friday night, something in her posture eased. Just a little. Just enough. And Caleb went back to work, the wrench solid and sure in his hands, and tried not to think about the sick, cold rage coiling in his chest at the thought of someone hurting that kid. Tried. And failed. Friday night came around again, and Caleb found himself back at the diner, back in the same booth. But this time, he wasn't alone. Lena sat across from him, Milo beside her, the boys' coloring books spread out on the table. Marlene brought 3 plates of meatloaf without being asked, her smile small and knowing. Caleb looked at the food in front of him, looked at Lena, who was cutting Milo's meat into small, careful pieces, looked at the empty seat that used to haunt him. It was still empty. The grief was still there. The weight of what he'd lost hadn't lightened, but for the first time in 3 years, it didn't feel like the only thing in the room. You okay? Lena asked, and Caleb realized he'd been staring. Yeah, he said. I'm okay. Milo looked up at him, syrup already on his chin again, and grinned, and Caleb found himself smiling back. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. The cold pressed in, but inside the diner, it was warm, and the booth that used to hold ghosts now held something else. Something fragile. Something new. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt both temporary and permanent, like a breath held too long. Lena's shifts at the diner became regular, lunch through dinner, 5 days a week. And Milo's presence in the shop became as natural as the smell of oil and metal. The boy had claimed the corner table as his territory, spreading out homework and drawings with the kind of focus that reminded Caleb of someone building a fortress 1 brick at a time. Caleb didn't talk much, never had, but Milo filled the silence with questions that ranged from mechanical to philosophical with no warning. Why do spark plugs spark? Would be followed 10 minutes later by, do you think clouds get lonely? And Caleb found himself answering both with the same patient seriousness. Clouds are made of water droplets, Caleb said one afternoon, his hands deep in an engine block. They're not alive, so they don't feel things. But what if they did? Milo persisted, his crayon moving across the page in wide blue strokes. Then I guess they'd have each other, Caleb said. There's usually more than one. Milo considered this, nodded like Caleb had just solved a great mystery, and went back to his drawing. When he finished, he brought it over. A picture of the shop, the truck out front, and 3 stick figures labeled in careful letters. Caleb, Mama, Milo. That's us, Milo announced. Caleb looked at the drawing, at the way Milo had put them all standing together under a sun with exactly 7 rays, and something shifted in his chest. That's real good, he said quietly. Milo beamed and taped it to the wall beside the workbench where it stayed. But beneath the surface of routine, the tension never fully disappeared. Lena's phone would ring at odd hours, blocked numbers that she'd stare at until they stopped, her face going pale and tight. She never answered, but Caleb saw the way her hands would shake afterward, the way she'd check the locks twice, 3 times before bed. The town's whispers grew louder. Caleb heard them in the hardware store, at the gas station, in the careful way some customers suddenly found other mechanics to take their business to. He didn't care about the gossip, but he cared that Lena heard it too. Saw the way she'd come back from the grocery store with her shoulders hunched, the way Milo asked one night why Mrs. Patterson had called his mama that woman, in a voice that made it sound like a curse. People talk, Caleb told him, his tone flat. Doesn't mean they know what they're talking about. But why do they say mean things? Because being mean is easier than being kind, Caleb said. Takes less effort, less courage. Milo frowned, processing this, then said, I think you're brave. Caleb's throat tightened. I'm not. I'm just doing what needs doing. That's what brave is, Milo said with the absolute certainty of someone who'd never learned to doubt his own convictions yet, and Caleb had no answer for that. It was late October when things began to shift. The The leaves had turned and started falling, carpeting the gravel lot in brittle reds and golds. Lena had been with them for nearly 6 weeks, and she'd saved enough for a security deposit on a small apartment across town. She told Caleb about it one evening after Milo had gone to bed, her voice careful, like she was testing how the words would land. "There's a place on Maple Street," she said. "1 bedroom, but it's clean. Landlord says we can move in next week if the deposit clears." Caleb nodded, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "That's good, real good." Lena's smile was small, uncertain. "It is. It's what we need. A place that's ours." "Makes sense." They stood in the main bay, the overhead light casting long shadows, and the silence stretched between them like something fragile. "You've been more than generous," Lena said. "More than anyone's ever been. I don't know how to thank you. Already told you, don't have to. But I want to. I need you to know that what you did, letting us stay, helping with Milo, paying for the hospital," her voice caught. "It saved us. You saved us." Caleb looked away, uncomfortable with the weight of her gratitude. "You did the hard part. I just gave you a place to land." "That's not nothing, Caleb." "Didn't say it was. But you're the one who got yourself here. You're the one working double shifts, putting food on the table, making sure that kid's got everything he needs. That's all you." Lena's eyes were bright with something Caleb couldn't quite name. "Still," she said, "thank you." He nodded, and they left it at that. But over the next few days, something changed in the way they moved around each other. Lena started cleaning the shop without being asked, organizing tools, sweeping the bay. She'd bring coffee in the mornings, made the way Caleb liked it, black, no sugar, without ever asking how he took it. And Caleb found himself staying later than he needed to, fixing things that could have waited, just to be there when she got home from the diner. It was Marlene who called him out on it. "You're getting attached," she said one afternoon, sliding a plate of pie across the counter even though he hadn't ordered it. Caleb frowned. "Don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't. That's why you're here every day for lunch now instead of just Fridays. That's why you watch the door every time it opens, like you're expecting someone." "I'm expecting customers." Marlene snorted. "Right, and I'm expecting Ed Harris to walk in here and propose. Don't bullshit a bullshitter, Caleb." He picked up his fork, cutting into the pie to avoid her eyes. "She's moving out next week. Got a place lined up." "I know. She told me." Marlene leaned against the counter, her expression softening. "And how do you feel about that?" "Feel like it's good. It's what she needs." "That's not what I asked." Caleb set down the fork. "What do you want me to say, Marlene?" "The truth would be a nice start." He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. Finally, he said, "I don't know what I feel, and even if I did, it wouldn't matter. She's got a kid. She's running from a bad situation. Last thing she needs is me complicating things." "Who says you'd be complicating anything?" "I do," Caleb said flatly. "She needs stability, safety, not some broken-down mechanic with more ghost than sense." Marlene's face gentled. "You're not as broken as you think you are, hun." "Yeah, well, that's a matter of perspective." She sighed, shook her head, and walked away, leaving him alone with the pie he didn't want anymore. That night, Caleb found Milo sitting on the front step of the shop, his blue backpack beside him, staring up at the stars. The temperature had dropped, and the boy's breath came out in small clouds. "Shouldn't you be inside?" Caleb asked, settling down beside him. "Mama's on the phone," Milo said. "She does that sometimes. Gets all quiet and sad." Caleb's chest tightened. "She say what about?" "No, but I think it's my dad." The word hit Caleb like a fist. "Your dad calls her?" Milo nodded. "She doesn't answer, but after she cries. She thinks I don't hear, but I do." Caleb looked down at the boy, at the way his small shoulders were hunched against the cold, and felt rage burn hot and sharp in his gut. "You ever meet your dad, Milo?" "I don't remember him much," Milo said. "Just that he yelled a lot. And one time he made my mouth bleed." He said it matter-of-factly, like he was reporting the weather, and that made it worse. "That's not okay," Caleb said carefully. "You know that, right? Adults aren't supposed to hurt kids, ever." "I know. That's why Mama left." Milo looked up at him. Are you going to marry my mama? The question knocked the air out of Caleb's lungs. What? Tommy at school says when a man and a lady live together, they get married. Are you and Mama going to get married? We don't live together, Caleb said, his voice rougher than he intended. Your mama's staying here temporary. That's different. Oh. Milo sounded disappointed. I thought maybe you could be my new dad. Caleb's throat closed up entirely. He stared at the boy, at the open, hopeful expression on his face, and had no idea what to say. Your mama doesn't need a husband, Caleb managed finally. She's doing just fine on her own. But don't you like her? That's not... Caleb stopped, scrubbed a hand over his face. It's complicated, kid. Why? Because grown-up things usually are. Milo frowned, clearly unsatisfied with that answer, but before he could push further, the door opened and Lena stepped out. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale, but she forced a smile when she saw them. Milo, it's freezing out here. Come inside. I'm not cold, Milo protested, but he stood up anyway, slinging his backpack over one shoulder. He paused at the door, looked back at Caleb. I still think you should marry her. Then he disappeared inside, leaving Caleb and Lena standing in the cold. Lena's smile faded. I'm sorry, he's got ideas in his head. He's a kid. Kids have ideas. Still, I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. We'll be out of your hair next week anyway. Not trying to get rid of you, Caleb said. I know, but it's time. We've imposed long enough. Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion carved into every line of her face. Saw the fear she carried like a second skin. You okay? Lena's laugh was hollow. Define okay. Was it him? On the phone? Her expression shuddered. I don't know. Probably. The number was blocked. You should go to the police. And tell them what? That I'm getting calls from a blocked number? That my ex-husband might be looking for me? They'll tell me to come back when there's an actual threat, and by then it'll be too late. So what are you going to do? What I've been doing, Lena said, her voice brittle. Keep moving. Keep looking over my shoulder. Keep hoping he gets tired of looking. She wrapped her arms around herself. I'm good at running, Caleb. It's the stopping that scares me. Caleb wanted to tell her she didn't have to run anymore, wanted to promise that he'd keep her safe, that nothing bad would happen as long as she stayed. But promises like that were lies dressed up in good intentions. And Caleb had learned the hard way that intentions didn't stop bad things from happening. So instead, he said, You're tougher than you think. Lena's eyes met his, and for a second something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. Two people who'd both learned that survival wasn't pretty, wasn't noble, was just the act of getting through one day and then the next. Maybe, she said quietly, or maybe I'm just too stubborn to quit. That works too. She almost smiled. Almost. Then she went inside and Caleb stayed out in the cold a little longer, staring at the stars and trying not to think about what happened to people when their luck ran out. The apartment on Maple Street fell through 3 days before Lena was supposed to move in. The landlord called with apologies. Another tenant had decided to stay. The place wasn't available after all, so sorry for the inconvenience. Lena took the news with a tight nod, hung up the phone, and didn't cry until she thought Caleb couldn't hear her. He heard anyway. You can stay, he told her that night, long as you need. I can't keep doing this to you. You're not doing anything to me. The room's empty otherwise. May as well use it. Lena shook her head. People are already talking. If we stay longer, let them talk, Caleb said. They've got nothing better to do anyway. It's not fair to you. Life's not fair, Caleb said, but that doesn't mean we can't try to make it a little less unfair when we get the chance. Lena looked at him for a long time, her eyes searching his face for something, doubt maybe, or resentment. But Caleb's expression stayed steady, and eventually she nodded. Okay, she whispered. A little longer. Just until I find something else. But a little longer stretched into November, and the town's whispers turned sharper. Caleb started losing customers, people who'd been coming to him for years suddenly finding excuses to take their business elsewhere. He didn't confront them, didn't defend himself, just kept his head down and worked on the cars that did come in. It was Milo who noticed first. "How come Mr. Peterson doesn't come here anymore?" he asked one afternoon, looking up from his homework. "He found another shop," Caleb said. "Why?" "Don't know. People change their minds sometimes." "Is it because of us?" Caleb's hand stilled on the wrench. "What makes you say that?" "I heard some ladies talking at the diner. They said Mama was taking advantage of you. That we should leave." Milo's voice was small. "Are we bad?" Caleb set down the wrench and crouched in front of the boy. "Listen to me. You and your mama are not bad. Not even a little bit. Those ladies don't know what they're talking about, and their opinions don't mean a damn thing. You understand?" Milo nodded, but his eyes were still worried. "You're a good kid," Caleb said. "Best kid I know. And your mama's doing everything she can to take care of you. That's all that matters. But what if people keep being mean?" "Then they keep being mean," Caleb said, "and we keep doing what's right, because being right matters more than being popular." Milo seemed to accept this, but Caleb saw the weight of it settle on his small shoulders, and he hated the people who'd put it there. That Sunday, Caleb took Milo to the hardware store for supplies. They were loading 2x4s into the truck when Dale Shepard approached, a man Caleb had known since high school. Dale's smile was friendly enough, but there was something sharp underneath it. "Caleb," Dale said, "heard you've got yourself some house guests." "Something like that." "That woman from the diner, right? Lena?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "What about her?" Dale shrugged. "Just seems strange is all. A single woman shows up out of nowhere, moves into your shop, starts working at Marlene's. People are asking questions. People should mind their business." "Maybe. But you know how it is. Small town, people talk, and some folks are wondering if maybe she's got an agenda." Caleb's voice went cold. "Say what you mean, Dale." "I'm just saying, you're a good guy. Got your own shop, no family to support. That makes you a target for someone looking to take advantage." "Lena's not taking advantage of anyone." "You sure about that? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like she's got you wrapped around her finger, her and that kid." Caleb stepped forward, and Dale stepped back instinctively. "That kid," Caleb said quietly, "has been through more than you could imagine, and his mama's working herself to the bone to give him a better life. So if you've got something to say about them, say it now. Otherwise, keep their names out of your mouth." Dale raised his hands in mock surrender. "Hey man, I'm just looking out for you." I don't need it." Dale's smile faded. "Suit yourself. But don't say I didn't warn you when it all blows up." He walked away, and Caleb stood there, fists clenched, until Milo's small voice cut through the anger. "Caleb, are you okay?" Caleb looked down at the boy, forced his hands to unclench. "Yeah, kid, I'm okay." But he wasn't, and the weight of the town's judgment was starting to press down harder than he wanted to admit. That night, Lena confronted him. She'd heard about the encounter from Marlene, who'd heard it from Dale's wife, and she was furious, not at Dale, but at herself. "This has to stop," she said, pacing the small back room while Milo slept on the couch. "I'm ruining your life." "You're not." "Yes, I am. You're losing customers because of me. People are saying awful things, and now you're getting into confrontations at the hardware store? Dale's an idiot. Always has been." "That's not the point." Lena's voice cracked. "The point is, you've done everything for us, and all we've done is make things worse." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" She stopped pacing, turned to face him. "Be honest with me, Caleb. Has business dropped since we got here?" He hesitated, and that was answer enough. Lena's face crumpled. "I knew it. God, I knew it." "It's not your fault," Caleb said. "People are going to think what they want to think. Doesn't change what's right." "But it's costing you, and that's not fair." "Life's not fair," Caleb said again. "We've established that." "So what, we just keep going like this? Keep letting people destroy your reputation while we hide out here like we're doing something wrong?" "We're not doing anything wrong." "Then why does it feel like we are?" Lena's voice broke entirely. "Why does it feel like everywhere I go I'm bringing disaster with me?" Caleb crossed the room, and before he could think better of it, he put his hands on her shoulders. "Listen to me. You are not a disaster. You're a woman trying to protect her kid, And if people can't see that, if they want to judge you for doing what you have to do, then screw them. Lena looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to fix this. You don't have to fix it. You just have to get through it. And then what? And then you keep going. That's all any of us can do. Lena leaned forward, and Caleb found himself pulling her into a hug without thinking. She was small against his chest, trembling, and he held her carefully, like something that might break. I'm so tired, she whispered into his shirt. I know. I don't know how much longer I can keep running. Then stop running, Caleb said. Stay here. Let me help. You've already helped so much. So let me help more. Lena pulled back just enough to look at him, her eyes red and searching. Why? Why do you care so much? And Caleb didn't have a good answer. Didn't have words for the way Milo's laugh had started filling the empty spaces in the shop, or the way Lena's presence had made Friday nights feel less like penance and more like peace. Didn't have words for the fact that somewhere along the way, they'd stopped being strangers and started being something else. Something he didn't have a name for but felt in his chest every time they walked through the door. So he said what he always said. Because somebody should. And this time, Lena kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't expected. Just a soft press of lips, tentative and brief. And when she pulled back, her eyes were wide with shock at her own boldness. I'm sorry, she stammered. I shouldn't have. But Caleb kissed her back, slower this time, more certain, and Lena made a small sound against his mouth that was half sob, half relief. When they finally broke apart, they stood there in the dim light of the back room, foreheads touching, breathing hard. This is a bad idea, Lena whispered. Probably. You don't need this kind of complication. Maybe not, but I want it anyway. Lena's breath hitched. Caleb, I'm not asking for anything, he said quietly. I'm not expecting anything. I care about you and Milo, and if that makes things complicated, then fine. I'll deal with complicated. Lena's eyes filled with fresh tears. You're going to break my heart. Not if I can help it. You can't promise that. No, Caleb admitted. But I can promise I'll try. And in that small room, with Milo sleeping soundly and the night pressing in around them, that felt like enough. They didn't tell Milo, didn't tell anyone. But things shifted again, subtle but undeniable. The way Lena's hand would brush Caleb's when she passed him coffee. The way he'd find excuses to stay in the same room as her. The way they'd catch each other's eyes and smile like they were sharing a secret. Milo noticed anyway, because kids always did. But he didn't say anything, just watched them with that serious, thoughtful expression he got sometimes, and seemed satisfied with whatever conclusion he'd drawn. The calls from blocked numbers continued. Lena stopped answering her phone entirely, let it ring itself out while her face went pale and tight. Caleb wanted to take the phone from her hands, wanted to answer it himself and tell whoever was on the other end exactly what would happen if they kept calling. But Lena wouldn't let him. It'll make it worse, she said. Trust me, the best thing I can do is ignore it. And if ignoring it doesn't work, then we'll deal with it when we have to. But Caleb could see the fear eating at her, could see the way she'd check the locks twice at night, the way she'd position herself between Milo and the door whenever someone new came into the diner. She was waiting for something, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And 2 weeks later, it did. Caleb was under a Ford pickup, wrestling with a rusted exhaust system, when he heard the unfamiliar engine pull into the lot. The sound was wrong, too smooth, too deliberate, not the rough idle of the work trucks and sedans that usually rattled up to his bay. He slid out from under the chassis, wiping his hands on a rag, and saw the black Audi sedan parked at an angle that blocked the driveway. The door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, well-dressed in slacks and a button-down that probably cost more than Caleb made in a week. His hair was styled, his smile practiced, and everything about him screamed money and control. He looked around the shop with the kind of casual assessment that said he was cataloging exits and weaknesses without seeming to. Caleb's gut went cold. "Help you?" he called out, staying where he was. The man's smile widened. "I'm looking for my wife." "Heard she might be staying around here?" Caleb's hand tightened on the rag. "Don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." The man took a few steps closer, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed. Everything about him was designed to seem reasonable, non-threatening. Lena Ward, pretty woman, dark hair, usually has a kid with her. Someone told me she's been working at the diner down the street. Thought maybe you'd seen her. Lots of people work at the diner. But not lots of people are living in the back of auto shops. The man's eyes flicked to the door behind Caleb and his smile turned knowing. That's an interesting arrangement you've got going on. Very generous of you. Caleb stepped forward, putting himself between the man and the door. I think you should leave. I just want to talk to her. That's all. Just talk. The man spread his hands, all innocence. I'm her husband. I have a right to see my son. You've got no rights here. The man's smile finally slipped, just a fraction. You don't know anything about me or my family. This is between me and Lena. She doesn't want to talk to you. Did she tell you that? Or are you just making assumptions? The man took another step forward. See, from where I'm standing, it looks like you're keeping my wife and child from me. That's a serious thing. Could get a man in trouble. Could get a man's jaw broken too, Caleb said quietly. The man laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that a threat? It's a fact. You're on my property. I'm asking you to leave. You don't leave, I'll make you leave. They stood there 10 feet apart, the air between them crackling with violence that hadn't happened yet. The man's eyes were cold, calculating, measuring Caleb the way someone might measure an obstacle they were planning to remove. Then, like a switch flipped, the smile came back. You know what? You're right. I apologize. I shouldn't have come here like this. He held up his hands, backing toward his car. Just tell Lena I stopped by, would you? Tell her I just want to talk, that's all. He got in the Audi, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot. But before he left, he looked at Caleb one more time through the open window. Nice shop you've got here, he said. Be a shame if anything happened to it. Then he was gone, the black car disappearing down the road, and Caleb stood in the gravel lot with his heart hammering against his ribs and his hands shaking with adrenaline. He pulled out his phone and called Lena. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright. Hey, I'm on break. What's up? He was here, Caleb said. The brightness died instantly. What? Just now. Black Audi. Said his name was Trent, said he was looking for his wife. The silence on the other end was so complete that Caleb thought the call had dropped. Then Lena's voice came back, thin and brittle. What did you tell him? Told him to leave. He did. But Lena, he knows. He knows you're here, knows about Milo. He threatened the shop. Oh God. Her breathing was coming fast now, panicked. Oh God. Lena, breathe. Just breathe. I have to go. I have to get Milo and go right now before he comes back. No, Caleb said sharply. You stay where you are. Don't go anywhere alone. I'm coming to get you. Caleb, you don't understand. If he found us, if he knows where we are, then running won't help. He already knows. Best thing you can do is stay somewhere public until we figure this out. There's nothing to figure out. Lena's voice broke. He's not going to stop. He never stops. The only thing I can do is run and hope he doesn't catch up. And what happens when he does? What happens the next time and the time after that? Caleb's voice was hard now, cutting through her panic. You can't run forever, Lena. At some point you have to stand and fight. I can't fight him. You don't know what he's like. So tell me. Tell me everything, right now, so I know what we're dealing with. Lena made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. We. You keep saying we, because it is we. Whether you like it or not, I'm in this now, and I'm not letting you go through it alone. Another long silence. Then, quietly, I'm scared. I know, but you're not alone. Now stay at the diner. Lock the doors if you have to. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Caleb drove faster than he should have, his mind running through scenarios and contingencies. He needed to know more about Trent Ward, what he was capable of, what his resources were, whether he was the type to follow through on threats or just make them. He needed to convince Lena to file a police report, get a restraining order, create a paper trail. And he needed to figure out how to keep Milo safe if things went sideways. When he pulled up to the diner, Lena was standing outside, arms wrapped around herself, her face pale. Marlene stood beside her, one hand on Lena's shoulder, her expression grim. He came here too, Marlene said as Caleb approached. About 20 minutes ago. Sat at the counter, ordered coffee, asked real polite if Lena was working today. What did you tell him? Told him we had a Lena on staff, but she wasn't in. He drank his coffee, left a $20 tip, and walked out smiling. Marlene's jaw was tight. But before he left, he made sure to mention how pretty the diner was, how it would be terrible if something happened to it. Caleb swore under his breath. I called the sheriff, Marlene continued. Told them about the threat. They said unless he actually does something, there's not much they can do. Suggested we file for a restraining order. Already planning on it, Caleb said. He looked at Lena. Where's Milo? School. He's safe there until 3. Okay, we pick him up together, bring him back to the shop, and we don't leave him alone, not for a second. Lena nodded, her eyes glassy with barely controlled fear. He's going to do something, Caleb. I know him. He doesn't make empty threats. Neither do I, Caleb said. Now, come on. We've got work to do. They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. Caleb installed new locks on all the doors at the shop, reinforced the windows, and set up motion sensor lights in the lot. He called a buddy from his army days, a guy who now did private security, and got advice on cameras and alarm systems. Then he drove Lena to the courthouse and waited while she filed for an emergency restraining order. The clerk was sympathetic but realistic. These take time to process. Could be a few days before a judge reviews it. And even then, a piece of paper doesn't stop someone who's determined. It's a start, Caleb said. When they picked up Milo from school, the boy knew immediately that something was wrong. He climbed into the truck and looked between them with those 2 old eyes. Is it my dad? He asked. Lena's hands clenched in her lap. Yes, baby, but it's going to be okay. Is he going to hurt us again? No, Caleb said before Lena could answer. He's not, because I'm not going to let him. Milo looked at him, measuring the truth of that statement, and then nodded. Okay. That night, Caleb didn't go home. He slept in the main bay of the shop, a baseball bat propped against the workbench within reach, his phone plugged in and volume turned all the way up. Every sound made him jerk awake. The wind against the metal siding, a car passing on the street, the building settling on its foundation. Lena couldn't sleep either. He heard her moving around the back room, pacing, checking the locks. Around 2 a.m, she came out to the main bay and found him sitting on the floor, back against the wall. You should try to rest, she said softly. Could say the same to you. She sat down beside him, pulling her knees up to her chest. I can't stop thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. So think about the ways it could go right. Like what? Like he gets arrested for violating the restraining order. Like he realizes he's outmatched and backs off. Like he does something stupid and ends up in jail where he belongs. Lena rested her head on her knees. You don't know him. He's smart. Careful. He knows how to stay just on the right side of the law while making your life hell. Then we'll be smarter, more careful. It's not that simple. Maybe not. But giving up isn't an option. Caleb looked at her profile in the dim light from the security lamp outside. You asked me before why I keep helping. Want to know the real answer? Lena lifted her head. What? 3 years ago, my son died in a car accident. He was 7, same age as Milo. Caleb's voice was steady, but it cost him. It was raining. I was driving. A truck ran a red light and hit us passenger side. My boy didn't stand a chance. Lena's hand found his in the darkness, squeezed tight. I spent 3 years sitting in that diner every Friday, eating across from an empty seat because it was the only way I could still feel like his father. And then you walked in with Milo, and he looked so hungry, so small, and I pushed that plate across the table without thinking. Caleb's throat tightened. I can't save my son. He's gone. But I can help yours. And if that means going up against a man who thinks he can take whatever he wants, then that's what I'll do. Lena was crying silently, tears running down her face. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Didn't need you to know. But now you do. And now you understand why I'm not walking away from this. From you. She leaned into him, and he put his arm around her shoulders, and they sat like that until the skies started to lighten outside. The restraining order came through 2 days later. A sheriff's deputy served it personally, finding Trent at the motel on the edge of town where he'd been staying. The deputy reported that Trent had taken it calmly, smiled, said he understood completely, and signed the acknowledgement without complaint. Too calm, Lena said when Caleb told her. He's planning something. She was right. That night, someone slashed 2 of Caleb's tires and spray-painted a message on the garage door. Mind your business. Caleb called the sheriff. They sent someone to take a report, dust for prints, take photos. But without witnesses or camera footage, there wasn't much they could do. Could be kids, the deputy suggested. Could be unrelated to your situation. Could be, Caleb said, knowing it wasn't. He replaced the tires and painted over the message, but the threat had been delivered. Trent was watching, waiting. The next incident was worse. Lena came out of the diner after her shift to find her windshield smashed, the driver's seat covered in safety glass. A note was tucked under the wiper blade, written in careful block letters. Come home. This time, Lena called the sheriff herself. This time, they took it more seriously. They brought Trent in for questioning. He denied everything, of course, said he'd been at the motel all evening, had receipts from the restaurant down the street to prove it, said he would never do something so crude, so beneath him, said it was probably just a coincidence, maybe someone who had a grudge against Lena for reasons having nothing to do with him. They had to let him go. His alibi checks out, the deputy told Caleb, and without proof it was him, there's nothing we can charge him with. He hired someone, Caleb said flatly. Probably, but we can't prove that either. Caleb wanted to put his fist through a wall. Instead, he took a breath and asked, what can we do? Document everything, take photos, save any messages or notes, build a case. Eventually, he'll slip up. And in the meantime? The deputy's expression was sympathetic but helpless. Stay vigilant. Don't go anywhere alone. Call us if anything else happens. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. That night, Caleb sat Lena and Milo down at the small table in the back room. We need a plan, he said. A real plan, in case things get worse. Milo looked scared but determined. What kind of plan? An emergency plan. If your dad shows up here, if he tries to take you, you need to know what to do. Caleb pulled out a piece of paper and a pen. First, you run. You don't talk to him. You don't try to reason with him. You just run. Where would you run to, Milo? Milo thought for a second. The diner? Good. Marlene knows what's going on. She'll call the police. What else? The hardware store? Milo suggested. Mr. Chen is always nice. Also good. What about at school? I tell my teacher and go to the principal's office. Perfect. Caleb wrote it all down. Now, if you can't run, if he catches you before you can get away, you scream. You scream as loud as you can. You fight. You do whatever you have to do to get attention. You understand? Milo nodded seriously. I understand. Lena's face was ashen. I can't believe we're having this conversation. I can't either, Caleb said, but we are. And I need to know you're both prepared. He looked at Lena. Same goes for you. You see him, you don't engage. You get somewhere public, you call 911, you call me. You don't try to handle him yourself. What if he corners me? Caleb's expression went hard. Then you do whatever you have to do to survive. And you know I'll come running. Lena's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. They went over the plan 3 more times, making sure Milo had it memorized, making sure Lena knew every exit from the diner and the shop. Caleb felt sick doing it, felt like he was teaching a kid how to survive a war instead of childhood, but better prepared than caught off guard. After Milo went to bed, Lena stayed at the table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold. This is my fault, she said quietly. No, it's not. I brought this into your life. I should have kept running, should have never stopped here. Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. If you'd kept running, where would you be right now? I don't know, somewhere else, somewhere he hadn't found us yet. For how long? A week, a month, and then what? Caleb's grip tightened. You can't run forever, Lena. At some point you have to make a stand. I'm not strong enough. Yes, you are. You've been strong enough to get this far. Strong enough to leave him in the first place, to keep Milo safe, to work yourself to exhaustion to build a better life. That takes strength most people don't have. It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like barely holding on. Sometimes that's the same thing. Lena looked at their joined hands. What if he hurts you? What if trying to help us gets you hurt or worse? Then it does, Caleb said simply. But I'm not backing down, not from him, not from this. Why not? Why risk so much for people you barely know? Because I know enough, Caleb said. I know you're brave and kind and trying your best. I know Milo's a good kid who deserves better than living in fear. And I know that if I walk away now, if I let you face this alone, I won't be able to live with myself. Lena's tears spilled over. I don't deserve you. That's not how it works. This isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. And I'm choosing to stay. She stood up, came around the table, and kissed him with a desperation that tasted like fear and hope mixed together. Caleb pulled her close, held her tight, and tried to pour every bit of certainty he had into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, Lena whispered against his lips, I'm falling for you. Good, Caleb said, because I already fell. They stood there in the dim light of the back room, holding each other while the night pressed in around them, and for a moment the fear receded just enough to let something else in. But the peace didn't last. The next evening, Caleb was closing up the shop when his phone rang. Lena's number. He answered immediately. Caleb. Her voice was shaking so badly he could barely understand her. Caleb, he took him. The world stopped. What? Trent took Milo. I was walking him home from school and Trent just drove up, grabbed Milo and drove away. I tried to stop him. She was sobbing now, words barely coherent. He hit me. He pushed me down and took my baby and drove away. Caleb's vision tunneled. Where are you? Corner of Maple and 5th. The police are here, but they're not doing anything. They're just taking a statement, and Milo is out there with him. I'm coming. Stay there. I'm coming right now. Caleb ran to his truck, threw it in gear, and drove like the devil was chasing him. His mind was racing through terrible scenarios, each worse than the last. Trent had violated the restraining order. He'd assaulted Lena. He'd kidnapped his own son. The man had just burned every bridge and crossed every line, which meant he had nothing left to lose. When Caleb screeched to a stop at Maple and 5th, he found Lena sitting on the curb, blood running from a split lip, a deputy trying to get information from her while she shook and cried. The moment she saw Caleb, she stumbled to her feet and ran to him. He caught her, held her up while she collapsed against his chest. He took him, she kept saying. He took him. I know. We're going to get him back. The deputy approached, his expression serious. Mr. Hayes, we've got an Amber Alert going out. Description of the vehicle, the child, everything. Every officer in the county is looking for them. Do you know where he went? Not yet, but we will. In the meantime, we need Mrs. Ward to come to the station, give a full statement, get those injuries documented. Lena pulled back, her eyes wild. I can't leave. What if he calls? What if Milo needs me? Your phone will work at the station, the deputy said gently. And we need that statement if we're going to build a case against him. Caleb looked at Lena. Go. Do what they need you to do. I'll start looking. Looking where? Anywhere. Everywhere. I'm not sitting around waiting. He pulled out his phone, already thinking through possibilities. The motel where Trent had been staying. The old apartment Lena had mentioned once. Anywhere a desperate man might take a scared child. Lena grabbed his arm. Caleb, be careful. Please. I will. You just focus on getting through that statement. And Lena? He waited until she met his eyes. We're getting him back. I promise you. We're getting him back. It was a promise he had no right to make. But he made it anyway. Because the alternative was unthinkable. Caleb drove to the motel first, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, every red light an agony of wasted seconds. The Starlight Motor Lodge sat on the edge of town like something left behind by better days, its neon sign flickering weakly in the gathering dusk. He parked and went straight to the office, where a woman with tired eyes and a cigarette hanging from her lip looked up from a magazine. Need to know if Trent Ward is still registered here, Caleb said, trying to keep his voice level. The woman squinted at him. Can't give out guest information. Caleb pulled out his wallet, set 2 20s on the counter. Please, his son is missing. I'm trying to help find him. She looked at the money, then at Caleb's face. and something in his expression must have convinced her because she sighed and checked her computer. Checked out this morning. Paid cash. Didn't leave a forwarding address. Caleb's stomach dropped. What was he driving? Black Audi. Saw it myself when he loaded up. Did he say anything? Mention where he was going? Mr. People who stay here don't generally chat about their plans. But her expression softened slightly. Though I did hear him on the phone in the parking lot yesterday. Sounded like he was talking about an apartment. Something about a blue door. A blue door, Caleb repeated. Did he say where? Didn't catch it. Sorry. Caleb thanked her and ran back to his truck, already dialing Lena. She answered on the first ring, her voice raw from crying. Anything? She asked. He checked out of the motel this morning. Clerk heard him mention an apartment with a blue door. Does that mean anything to you? There was a sharp intake of breath. The old place. The apartment we lived in before I left him. It has a blue door. Where is it? Other side of town, Parkview Apartments, Building C, Unit 12. Her voice cracked. Caleb, if he's there, if he took Milo back to that place, give me the address. I'm going now. The police are already sending units. I'll be there before they are. What's the address, Lena? She gave it to him, and he was moving before she finished speaking. The Parkview Apartments were 15 minutes across town in good traffic. Caleb made it in 8, running 2 stop signs and taking corners hard enough to make his tires scream. The complex was a sprawl of identical 2-story buildings, each one the color of old concrete and despair. Building C sat at the back, partially hidden by overgrown hedges. Caleb killed his headlights as he pulled in, scanning the parking lot for the black Audi. There. 3rd row, backed into a space like Trent was planning a quick exit. Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. He pulled out his phone to call 911, then hesitated. If Trent heard sirens, if he panicked, there was no telling what he'd do. But going in alone was stupid, reckless, exactly the kind of thing that got people hurt. Then his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A photo. It showed Milo sitting on a couch, his face pale and streaked with tears, his blue backpack clutched in his lap. The message beneath it read, "Tell Lena to call me. We need to talk like adults." Caleb's vision went red at the edges. He forwarded the photo to Lena with shaking hands, then typed, "I'm here. Don't call him yet. Give me 5 minutes." Her response came instantly. "Caleb, no. Wait for police." But Caleb was already out of the truck, already moving toward Building C with his phone in one hand and the tire iron from his truck bed in the other. The complex was quiet, most windows dark, the kind of place where people minded their own business because getting involved meant trouble. Unit 12 was on the ground floor, and sure enough, the door was painted a faded blue that looked black in the dim light. Caleb pressed his ear against it and heard nothing. No voices, no movement, just silence that made his skin crawl. He tried the knob. Locked. Then his phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. "I can see you, mechanic. Put down whatever you're holding and knock on the door like a civilized person, or I'll make sure the boy learns what happens when people don't listen." Caleb looked up and saw the curtain in the front window twitch. Trent was watching. Had probably been watching since Caleb pulled into the lot. He set down the tire iron slowly, held up his empty hands, and knocked. The door opened just wide enough for Trent to look out, and up close, Caleb could see the man had changed. The polished exterior from the shop visit was gone, replaced by something more raw. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair mussed, and there was a wildness in his eyes that set off every alarm bell in Caleb's head. "Where's Milo?" Caleb said. "Safe. Inside. Probably scared out of his mind because his mother's been filling his head with lies about me." Trent's smile was thin and sharp. "You're the mechanic, the White Knight. Lena always did have a type." "Let me see him." "Why? So you can play hero? Take him back to her?" Trent's expression hardened. "That's my son in there. My blood. And I'm not letting some stranger take him away from me. You grabbed him off the street and assaulted his mother. That's kidnapping and assault. You've already violated the restraining order. Every second you keep him here makes this worse." "Worse for who? For her?" "Good. She deserves worse." Trent's voice rose slightly. "She took everything from me, my family, my home, my reputation. Turned my own son against me with her poison, and now she's shacked up with you playing house like I never existed. That's not what's happening. Isn't it? Trent leaned forward. You think I don't know? You think I haven't been watching? I see how you look at her, how she looks at you. You've been playing daddy to my kid, sleeping in my bed. I'm not sleeping with her, Caleb said, which was technically true but felt like a lie anyway. And even if I was, that's not the point. The point is you're breaking the law. You're scaring your son, and you need to let him go before this gets any worse. Trent laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. Worse? You want to see worse? He pulled out his phone, held it up so Caleb could see the screen. One button, that's all it takes. One button and I send a message that brings this whole thing down. You think you're protecting them? You're just making it harder. Making what harder? Goodbye, Trent said, and slammed the door. Caleb heard the deadbolt slide home, heard footsteps retreating deeper into the apartment, and then he heard something that made his blood freeze. Milo's voice, small and terrified. I want my mom, please. I just want my mom. And Trent's response, cold and final. Your mom's not here. It's just us now, and we're going to have a talk about respect. Caleb didn't think. He stepped back, raised his boot, and kicked the door just below the handle with everything he had. The frame splintered, the lock gave way, and the door crashed inward. He was inside before the sound finished echoing. The apartment was small, dark, smelling of old cigarettes and something chemical. To his left was a kitchen barely bigger than a closet. To his right, a cramped living room. And in that living room stood Trent, one hand gripping Milo's shoulder hard enough to make the boy wince, the other hand holding a knife that caught the light from the single lamp. Get out, Trent said, his voice shaking with rage. Get out, or I swear to God. Let him go, Caleb said, his own voice eerily calm despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Right now, let him go and we can talk. We're past talking. You kicked in my door. That's breaking and entering. I could kill you right now and call it self-defense. Maybe, but you won't, because then you'd have to explain to the cops why you kidnapped your kid and why he's terrified of you. Caleb took a slow step forward. You're not stupid, Trent. You know how this ends if you keep going. You don't know anything about me. I know you hit women and children. I know you're so desperate to control something that you'd rather destroy your own family than let them be happy without you. Another step. I know you're scared. Ooh, Trent's grip on the knife tightened. I'm not scared. Yes, you are. You're terrified that if you let Milo go, if you let Lena go, you'll have nothing left. No one to control, no one to blame for your failures. Caleb's eyes flicked to Milo, who was crying silently, his whole body shaking. But hurting that kid won't fix what's broken in you. It'll just break him too. Shut up, Trent said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. Let him come to me, Caleb said quietly. Right now, let him walk over here, and then you and I can talk, man to man. No police, no lawyers, just us. You think I'm an idiot? The second I let him go, you'll run. I won't. I'll stay. I'll hear you out. Whatever you want to say about Lena, about your marriage, about how you got here, I'll listen. Caleb held up his hands, showing he was unarmed. But first you let the kid go, because whatever's between you and Lena, he didn't ask for any of this. For a long moment, Trent just stared at him, the knife wavering slightly. Then he looked down at Milo, at the boy's tear-streaked face, and something flickered across his expression. Doubt, maybe, or the faintest shadow of guilt. Fine, he said finally. Fine. But you stay. You try to leave. He didn't finish the threat, just released Milo's shoulder. Milo didn't need to be told twice. He ran across the room and threw himself at Caleb, wrapping his arms around Caleb's waist and sobbing into his shirt. Caleb crouched down, gathering the boy close. You're okay, he murmured. You're safe. I've got you. I want to go home, Milo choked out. I want Mama. I know, buddy, I know. Caleb looked up at Trent, who was still holding the knife but seemed frozen, lost. I'm taking him outside. You want to talk? We talk, but not with him here. Trent's jaw worked. You promised you'd stay. And I will, right outside that door. You can watch me the whole time. Caleb stood, keeping Milo tucked against his side. But he's done. He's leaving. And you're going to let him because whatever else you are, you're still his father. And somewhere in there, you don't actually want to hurt him. It was a gamble, a desperate, dangerous gamble based on nothing but Caleb's read of a man he barely knew. But Trent's hand lowered just slightly, and his eyes went to Milo with an expression that might have been regret. I never wanted to hurt him, Trent said, his voice suddenly thick. I just wanted my family back. I know, Caleb said, even though he didn't, even though he thought Trent was a coward and a liar. But right now, the truth didn't matter. Only getting Milo out mattered. But this isn't the way. Trent's shoulders sagged. Nothing's ever the right way with her. I try to talk, she runs. I try to explain, she won't listen. What am I supposed to do? Let her go, Caleb said. Let them both go. Stop fighting and just let them live their lives. And what do I get? Peace, Caleb said. Actual peace instead of this. Instead of restraining orders and fear and broken doors. Trent looked at the knife in his hand like he was surprised to find it there. Then he set it down on the coffee table and sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. Caleb didn't wait. He guided Milo toward the door, moving slowly, keeping his body between the boy and Trent. They were almost to the threshold when Trent's voice stopped them. Tell her I'm sorry, he said, not looking up. Tell her I never meant for it to go this far. Caleb didn't respond, just kept moving until they were outside, the cold night air hitting them like a blessing. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and called 911. This is Caleb Hayes. I'm at Parkview Apartments, Building C, Unit 12. I have Milo Ward, the child from the Amber Alert. His father's inside. He's armed but not currently threatening. Send units now. The dispatcher started asking questions, but Caleb handed the phone to a neighbor who'd poked his head out at the commotion and told him to answer while he got Milo to safety. He carried the boy to his truck, buckled him in, and then held him while they waited for the sirens. Milo cried himself out against Caleb's chest, his small hands fisted in Caleb's shirt, and Caleb just held on and murmured reassurances that felt inadequate but were all he had. When the police arrived, it was a flood of lights and voices and controlled chaos. They surrounded the building, called Trent out over a loudspeaker. It took 20 minutes of negotiation, but eventually Trent emerged with his hands up, looking defeated and small in the glare of the squad car lights. They cuffed him, read him his rights, loaded him into the back of a patrol car. As they drove past Caleb's truck, Trent looked out the window, and for just a second, his eyes met Caleb's. There was no rage there anymore. No threat. Just emptiness. Then he was gone, the taillights disappearing into the night, and Caleb let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for hours. A detective approached, introduced herself as Martinez, and asked Caleb to give a statement. He did, keeping it brief and factual, leaving out the parts about kicking in the door. When she asked Milo if his father had hurt him, the boy shook his head. He just held my shoulder really tight, and he was scary. But he didn't hit me. Martinez nodded, making notes. And the knife? He had it, Milo said, but he put it down when Caleb told him to. She looked at Caleb with something like respect. You took a hell of a risk going in there alone. Didn't feel like I had a choice. There's always a choice. You made the right one. She closed her notebook. We're going to need a full statement from Mrs. Ward too, but I'm guessing she's pretty anxious to see her son right now. She's at the station. Can I take him there? Actually, we'll transport you both. Standard procedure in cases like this. She must have seen Caleb's expression because she added, It's not you we're worried about. It's making sure everything's documented properly. This is going to trial, and we need our case airtight. So Caleb and Milo rode in the back of a patrol car to the station, and when they walked through the doors, Lena was there waiting. She saw Milo and made a sound that was half sob, half prayer, and then she was running, dropping to her knees to pull her son into her arms. Baby, oh my baby, you're okay, you're okay. She was crying so hard she could barely speak, her hands running over Milo's face, his arms, checking for injuries that weren't there. I'm okay, Mama, Milo said, hugging her back just as fiercely. Caleb came and got me. He wasn't scared at all. Lena looked up at Caleb over Milo's head, and the gratitude and fear and relief in her eyes was almost too much to bear. Thank you, she mouthed. Caleb nodded, his throat too tight to speak. They spent the next 3 hours at the station, giving statements, answering questions, filling out forms. The deputy who'd responded to the initial kidnapping kept Milo occupied with a coloring book and hot chocolate while the detectives took Lena through her account of the abduction. When they asked about Caleb's forced entry into the apartment, Lena didn't hesitate. "He saved my son's life," she said firmly. "Trent had a knife. He was unstable. If Caleb hadn't acted when he did, I don't know what would have happened." The detective interviewing her exchanged a look with his partner. "Mrs. Ward, we're not questioning Mr. Hayes' motives, but the law is complicated when it comes to civilians taking action like this. There could be legal ramifications." "Then I'll testify on his behalf," Lena said. "I'll do whatever it takes. He's not the one who should be in trouble here." In the end, they let it go with a warning. Trent was facing enough charges that adding a complaint about the broken door seemed petty. Kidnapping, assault, violation of a restraining order, reckless endangerment of a minor. The prosecutor was already talking about jail time, possibly years if they could make everything stick. It was nearly midnight when they finally left the station. Milo had fallen asleep in one of the chairs in the lobby, his blue backpack clutched to his chest like a shield. Caleb carried him to the truck while Lena walked beside them, her hand on Milo's back. "Where do we go now?" she asked quietly. "Back to the shop," Caleb said. "Tomorrow we figure out next steps. Tonight we just breathe." The drive was quiet except for Milo's occasional sleepy murmurs. Lena stared out the window, her arms wrapped around herself, and Caleb could see the tremors still running through her body. When they got back to the shop, Caleb carried Milo to the back room and laid him on the couch. The boy didn't wake, just curled into a ball inside. Lena covered him with a blanket, smoothed his hair back from his forehead, and then stood there watching him like she was afraid he'd disappear if she looked away. "You should try to rest," Caleb said. "I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see Trent's car driving away. I hear Milo crying for me." Her voice broke. "I couldn't protect him. I tried and I failed and he—" "You didn't fail," Caleb interrupted. "You did everything right. You called the police. You gave them information. You trusted me to find him. You could have been killed. But I wasn't." "You could have been," Lena insisted, turning to face him. "He had a knife, Caleb. He could have used it, and it would have been my fault for dragging you into this mess." Caleb crossed the room and took her face in his hands, gentle but firm. "Listen to me. I made my own choices, every single one, and I'd make them again in a heartbeat. You didn't drag me anywhere. I walked into this with my eyes open." "Why?" Lena's eyes were wet, searching his. "Why would you risk so much for us?" "I already told you, because somebody should. Because you and Milo deserve someone in your corner. Because—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. "Because what?" "Because I love you," Caleb said, the admission surprising him almost as much as it surprised her. "I love you, and I love that kid, and somewhere along the way you stopped being people I was helping and started being my family, and I protect my family." Lena's breath hitched. Then she kissed him, desperate and grateful, and full of everything she couldn't put into words. Caleb kissed her back, pouring 3 years of grief and loneliness and careful hope into it, and when they finally broke apart, they were both shaking. "I love you too," Lena whispered. "I think I have for a while. I was just too scared to say it." "You don't have to be scared anymore." "Don't I? Trent's in jail, but he won't stay there forever, and when he gets out, we'll deal with it," Caleb said. "Together. But tonight, he's locked up and Milo's safe, and you're here. That's enough." Lena leaned into him, and Caleb wrapped his arms around her and held on tight. They stood like that for a long time. Two people who'd been broken in different ways, finding something whole in each other. Eventually, exhaustion won out, and they collapsed onto the small bed in the corner of the back room, fully clothed, too tired to do anything but hold each other. Caleb listened to Lena's breathing even out as she finally fell asleep, and watched over her and Milo like he'd been doing for weeks now. His family. The word felt strange and right all at once. Outside, the night was cold and dark. But inside that small room, with the two people who'd given him a reason to feel again, Caleb felt warm for the first time in 3 years. And when sleep finally took him, he didn't dream of car crashes or empty seats or meals eaten in silence. He dreamed of Friday nights that didn't taste like grief anymore. Morning came too soon, pale light filtering through the high windows of the shop and landing across Caleb's face like an unwelcome reminder that the world kept turning whether you were ready or not. He woke to find Lena already up, sitting on the edge of the bed with her phone in her hands, staring at the screen with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What is it?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. She turned to him and he saw the exhaustion still carved into every line of her face despite the hours of rest. "The prosecutor's office. They want to meet this morning. They're fast-tracking Trent's arraignment." Caleb sat up, scrubbing a hand through his hair. "That's good, right?" "I think so. They said the evidence is strong. The Amber Alert, witness statements, the knife, Milo's testimony if they need it." She paused, her jaw tightening. "They're charging him with kidnapping, aggravated assault, child endangerment, and violation of the restraining order. The prosecutor thinks they can get him remanded without bail." "Meaning he stays locked up until trial." "Yeah." Lena's hands were shaking slightly. "It feels too good to be true. Like any second someone's going to tell me it's a mistake, that he's getting out, that this nightmare isn't actually over." Caleb reached for her hand, laced his fingers through hers. "It's not over yet, but it's getting there." From the couch, Milo stirred, making a small sound of confusion before his eyes opened. The moment he saw his mother, relief flooded his face and he sat up, the blue backpack tumbling to the floor. "Mama?" "Right here, baby." Lena crossed to him immediately, pulling him into her lap, even though he was getting too big for it. "How do you feel?" "Hungry," Milo said, which was so wonderfully normal that both adults almost laughed. "And my shoulder hurts a little. Where Dad grabbed me." The laughter died. Lena gently pushed down the collar of Milo's shirt, and they could all see the bruises blooming there. 4 distinct fingerprints in shades of purple and green. "I'm taking pictures of that," Caleb said quietly. "For the prosecutor." Lena nodded, blinking back tears as she carefully pulled Milo's shirt back up. "Does anywhere else hurt?" "No, just that." Milo looked between them. "Is Dad in jail?" "Yes," Lena said. "Is he going to stay there?" "We're going to do everything we can to make sure he does," Caleb said. "But right now, how about we get you some breakfast? Marlene's opens in 20 minutes. Milo's face brightened slightly. "Can I get pancakes?" "You can get whatever you want, kid." They cleaned up as best they could, Lena trying to cover the split in her lip with makeup, while Caleb documented Milo's bruises with his phone camera. The images made him sick. Concrete proof of violence against a child who'd done nothing but exist in the wrong man's orbit. He sent them to the prosecutor's office before he could think too hard about what those pictures meant, about how close things had come to being so much worse. The diner was nearly empty when they arrived, just the early morning regulars nursing coffee and reading newspapers. Marlene took one look at them and came around the counter, pulling Lena into a fierce hug. "Thank God," she said. "Thank God you're all okay." "We're okay," Lena managed, though her voice was thick. Marlene pulled back, her hands on Lena's shoulders. "The whole town's talking. About what happened, about what Caleb did." She glanced at him. "About half think you're a hero, and the other half think you're reckless and stupid." "What do you think?" Caleb asked. "I think you're both," Marlene said bluntly, "but I'm glad you were there. And I'm glad that bastard's in jail." She looked at Milo, her expression softening. "And I'm very glad to see you, young man. Pancakes?" Milo nodded eagerly, and Marlene swept him toward the kitchen, leaving Caleb and Lena alone in the booth. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened settling over them like a physical thing. Then Lena said, quietly, "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop." "What do you mean?" "I mean, every time things start to feel safe, something happens. And I'm terrified that this is just another pause before the next disaster." She looked at him. "What if he gets out? What if the charges don't stick? What if—" "Then we deal with it," Caleb said, repeating what he'd told her the night before. "But Lena, you can't live your whole life waiting for the worst to happen. At some point you have to believe that maybe, just maybe, things are actually getting better." "I don't know if I remember how to believe that." Then I'll believe it for both of us until you figure it out. Lena's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. The meeting with the prosecutor was at 10. They brought Milo with them because leaving him anywhere felt impossible right now, and the assistant district attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen, took one look at the boy's bruises, and her expression went hard as stone. "How old are you, Milo?" she asked gently. 6, Milo said, almost 7. "And can you tell me what happened yesterday when you saw your father?" Milo looked at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. Then, in a small but steady voice, he recounted the whole thing. Walking home from school with Lena, the black car pulling up, Trent getting out and grabbing him, the drive to the apartment, being scared, Caleb coming to get him. Patricia took notes throughout, her pen moving quickly. When Milo finished, she said, "You're very brave. Thank you for telling me." "Is my dad going to come back?" Milo asked. "Not if I have anything to say about it," Patricia said, "and I have a lot to say about it." She turned to Lena and Caleb. "The arraignment is this afternoon. Based on the evidence and his actions, I'm confident the judge will remand him without bail. The kidnapping alone is enough, but add in the assault, the restraining order violation, and the weapon. And this is a clear case of someone who poses a danger to his family." "How long before trial?" Lena asked. "Could be months. These things take time. But in the meantime, he stays locked up, and you can start rebuilding your lives without looking over your shoulder every 5 seconds. Patricia's expression softened slightly. "I've been doing this job for 15 years, Mrs. Ward. I've seen a lot of domestic violence cases, and I can tell you right now, what you did, leaving, protecting your son, fighting back, that took tremendous courage. A lot of women don't make it this far." Lena's voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't feel courageous, I felt terrified." "That's what courage is," Patricia said, "being terrified and doing it anyway." The arraignment was at 2 o'clock in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and institutional cleaning products. Caleb sat in the gallery with Milo, while Lena sat at the prosecutor's table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. When they brought Trent in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, Milo pressed closer to Caleb's side. "Is he going to look at us?" the boy whispered. "Maybe, but he can't touch you. He can't even get close. The officers won't let him." Trent did look, scanned the courtroom until his eyes found Lena, then Milo, then Caleb. But whatever he saw in their faces, whatever he'd been planning to communicate with that look, it died before it could take shape. He just looked tired, defeated, small in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. The judge was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every excuse and wasn't interested in hearing them again. She read through the charges with clinical efficiency, asked Trent how he pleaded. "Not guilty, Your Honor," his public defender said, because of course he did. Then Patricia stood and made her case for remand. She laid out the evidence methodically, the restraining order, the documented threats, the assault, the kidnapping, the weapon, the bruises on a 6-year-old child's shoulder. She showed the photos Caleb had taken that morning, and even from where he sat, Caleb could see the judge's expression harden. "Your Honor, this man is a clear and present danger to his ex-wife and son," Patricia concluded. "He has shown a pattern of escalating violence, a willingness to violate court orders, and a complete disregard for the safety of a child. The state requests he be held without bail until trial." The public defender tried to argue, something about Trent's ties to the community, his lack of prior arrests, his rights as a father, but the judge cut him off with a raised hand. "Counselor, your client violated a restraining order, assaulted his ex-wife, kidnapped his minor child, and brandished a weapon during the commission of these crimes. His rights as a father ended the moment he decided those actions were acceptable." She turned to Trent. "Mr. Ward, you are remanded to county custody without bail until such time as your trial is concluded. Bailiff, remove the defendant." Just like that, it was over. Trent was led away, and this time, when he looked back, there was something like understanding in his eyes. The understanding that he'd lost, that it was truly, finally over. Outside the courthouse, Lena stood on the steps and breathed like someone who'd just surfaced after being underwater too long. Milo held her hand on one side, Caleb's on the other, and for the first time in months, maybe years, her shoulders weren't hunched in anticipation of the next blow. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we go home," Caleb said, "and we figure out what comes next." What came next was slower, quieter than any of them expected. The days after the arraignment felt strange, like they were all waiting for something terrible that never arrived. Lena kept checking over her shoulder out of habit before remembering there was no one following her. Milo had nightmares the first few nights, waking up crying for his mother, but they came less frequently as the week went on, and Caleb found himself remembering how to sleep through the night without startling awake at every sound. The town's whispers changed too. Some people apologized, awkwardly, uncomfortably, for the things they'd said and assumed. Others stayed silent but started bringing their cars back to Hayes Automotive, and Caleb accepted their business without comment because holding grudges took energy he'd rather spend elsewhere. Marlene was the loudest in her vindication. "Told everyone who'd listen that you were doing the right thing," she said one afternoon, refilling Caleb's coffee. "Some people need to learn to mind their own damn business." Dale Shepard came into the shop 2 weeks after the arraignment, looking sheepish. "Wanted to apologize," he said, "for what I said at the hardware store. About Lena. I was out of line." Caleb looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Yeah, you were, but I appreciate you saying so. For what it's worth, what you did, going after that kid, standing up to that guy, that took guts." "Or stupidity," Caleb said, echoing Marlene. "Jury's still out." Dale laughed, and some of the tension broke. They'd never be close friends, but the hostility was gone, replaced by something like mutual respect. The legal process ground forward with the speed of glaciers, depositions, motions, pre-trial hearings. Patricia kept them informed every step of the way, and each piece of news was better than the last. Trent's public defender tried to negotiate a plea deal, but Patricia held firm. She wanted jail time, a permanent restraining order, and supervised visitation at best. "He's going to take it," she told them in early December. "His lawyer knows he'll lose at trial. The evidence is too strong. He's looking at a minimum of 5 years if he pleads guilty, probably more given the aggravating circumstances." "And if he doesn't take it," Lena asked, "then we go to trial and he gets 10 to 15. He's not stupid. He'll take the deal." She was right. A week later, Trent accepted the plea agreement. 5 years in state prison, to be followed by 10 years of probation and a permanent restraining order. He would never be allowed unsupervised contact with Milo again. And if he violated any of the terms, he'd serve the full 15-year sentence. When Patricia called with the news, Lena sat down slowly, like her legs had stopped working. "It's over," she said, the words sounding like a question. "It's over," Patricia confirmed. "He'll be sentenced next month, but the deal is done. You're free, Mrs. Ward." After she hung up, Lena just sat there, staring at nothing. Caleb watched her, waiting until finally she looked up at him with eyes that were both devastated and relieved in equal measure. "I don't know how to feel," she admitted. "However you feel is fine," Caleb said. "I thought I'd be happy, relieved, but I just feel empty. Like I've been running for so long that I don't remember how to stop. Then we'll figure it out together, one day at a time." Milo, who'd been coloring at his corner table, came over and climbed into his mother's lap without a word. She held him close, and Caleb put his hand on her shoulder, and they sat like that while the shop settled around them. The weeks leading up to Christmas were the best Caleb could remember in years. Lena started taking shifts at the diner again, but now she came home with stories instead of fear. Milo brought home a paper snowflake he'd made in school and taped it to the shop window with such ceremony that Caleb found himself grinning. They started having dinner together every night, sometimes takeout, sometimes Lena's cooking, once a truly terrible attempt at homemade pizza that they ate anyway while laughing at how bad it was. And slowly, carefully, the boundaries between Lena and Milo staying at the shop and this being their home began to blur. It was Milo who brought it up first. They were decorating a small Christmas tree Caleb had bought on impulse, the first one he'd had in 3 years, when the boy said, "Are we going to live here forever?" Lena's hand stilled on the ornament she was hanging. "I don't know, baby. We're still saving up for our own place." "But I like it here." Milo looked at Caleb. "Don't you want us to stay?" Caleb felt both of them looking at him, waiting. "Of course I want you to stay. But that's not really my decision to make." Why not? Milo asked with the logic of someone too young to understand adult complications. Because, Caleb looked at Lena, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Because your mom and I haven't really talked about what happens next. Then talk about it, Milo said, and went back to hanging ornaments like the matter was settled. That night, after Milo was asleep, Caleb and Lena sat in the main bay of the shop with mugs of coffee going cold between them. We should probably talk, Lena said. Probably. About what we're doing, what this is. Caleb set down his mug. What do you want it to be? I don't know. I've spent so long just trying to survive that I haven't let myself think about actually living. She looked at him. But I know I don't want to leave. I know Milo's happy here. I know I'm happy here. And I know you're a huge part of that. I'm happy too, Caleb said. Happier than I've been in 3 years. Since my son died, I've been going through the motions. But you and Milo, you made me want to actually live again. Made me remember what it feels like to have people to care about. So where does that leave us? I think, Caleb said slowly, it leaves us wherever we want to be. If you want to save up and get your own place, I'll help you do that. If you want to stay here, make this a permanent thing, I'd like that too. But either way, I'm not going anywhere. I love you. I love Milo. And whatever comes next, we figure it out together. Lena's eyes were wet. You really mean that? Every word. She crossed the space between them and kissed him, soft and slow and full of promise. When they broke apart, she was smiling. I want to stay, she said. Not because I need to, not because I'm running from something, but because this feels like home. You feel like home. Then stay, Caleb said. Both of you, for as long as you want. What if Milo starts calling you Dad? Lena asked, her voice careful. I know you lost your son, and I don't want to. He can call me whatever he wants, Caleb interrupted gently. It won't replace what I lost. Nothing will. But that doesn't mean there's not room for new love, new family. My boy would want that for me. I think he'd like Milo. I think they would have been friends. Lena leaned her head against his shoulder. Tell me about him. Your son. I want to know. So Caleb did. He talked about Jamie, 7 years old, obsessed with dinosaurs, terrible at tying his shoes, but brilliant at making people laugh. He talked about the way Jamie used to fall asleep during car rides, how he'd wake up confused when they got home. He talked about teaching him to ride a bike, about bedtime stories, about the hundreds of small moments that made up a life. And Lena listened, holding his hand, letting him grieve and remember and honor what he'd lost without trying to fix it or minimize it. He sounds wonderful, she said when he finished. He was. And I'll miss him forever. But I'm starting to think that's okay. That I can miss him and still be here. Still be present for you and Milo. You are present, Lena said. More than anyone's ever been for us. They sat together in the quiet of the shop, surrounded by tools and the smell of oil and the blue backpack hanging on its hook beside Milo's newer, brighter one. The one Caleb had bought him for his birthday last week. The old and the new, existing side by side without erasing each other. Christmas came and went in a blur of laughter and too much food, and Milo's excitement over the bicycle Caleb and Lena had conspired to give him. They spent the day at Marlene's because she'd insisted, and half the town showed up at various points to eat pie and drink coffee and gossip about people who weren't there. Felt normal. Wonderfully, beautifully normal. The sentencing hearing in January was brief. Trent stood before the judge, entered his guilty plea formally, and was sentenced to 5 years in state prison followed by probation. He didn't look at Lena or Milo, didn't make a statement, just accepted his fate with the same hollow expression he'd worn since the arraignment. Outside the courthouse afterward, Lena said, I should feel something, satisfaction, relief, something, but I just feel tired. Then be tired, Caleb said. You've earned it. You fought, you won, and now you get to rest. And she did. They all did. The weeks that followed were quieter than anything before them. Milo went back to school and brought home friends for play dates. Lena picked up extra shifts by choice rather than necessity, saving money not to escape, but to build something. And Caleb found that the shop felt less like a solitary refuge and more like the center of something living and growing. It was late February when Lena brought home the papers. She'd been to a lawyer, filed formally for divorce, and it had gone through uncontested because Trent had signed everything from prison without argument. "I'm officially divorced," she said, setting the documents on the workbench. "Legally single for the first time in 7 years. How does it feel? Like closing a door. Like I can finally stop looking backward and start looking forward." She turned to face him. "Caleb Hayes, would you want to go on a date with me? A real one. Not hiding, not afraid. Just us." Caleb smiled, the expression feeling natural now in a way it hadn't for years. "I would like that very much." They went to the diner, because of course they did. Same corner booth where this had all started, but this time there were 3 plates on the table instead of 2. Milo sat beside Lena, and Caleb sat across from them. And when Marlene brought their food, she winked. "About damn time," she said, and walked away before they could respond. Milo was working his way through pancakes with intense focus when he looked up suddenly and said, "Caleb?" "Yeah, bud?" "Can I call you Dad? My real dad's gone, and you're here, and it feels weird calling you Caleb when you feel like my dad." The question hit Caleb square in the chest, stealing his breath for a moment. Across the table, Lena's eyes were wet, but she was smiling. "You can call me whatever feels right," Caleb said, his voice rough. "But I'd be honored if you wanted to call me Dad." "Okay, Dad." Milo tested the word, grinned, and went back to his pancakes like he hadn't just fundamentally rearranged Caleb's entire world. Lena reached across the table and took Caleb's hand. "You okay?" "Yeah," Caleb managed. "I'm okay. Better than okay." And he was. For the first time in 3 years, sitting in that booth with people he loved and who loved him back, Caleb felt something he'd thought was gone forever. He felt whole. Spring arrived with green things pushing up through the last of the snow, and with it came changes that felt less like upheaval and more like natural progression. Lena moved her things from the back room to Caleb's house, the small 2-bedroom on the edge of town he'd been avoiding for years. They cleaned it together, painted Milo's new room blue at his request, and slowly turned it from a mausoleum of grief into a home. The shop remained their gathering place. Milo did homework at his corner table while Lena stopped by between shifts. And on Friday nights, they went to the diner together, 3 plates instead of 2, the ghost of grief present, but no longer in charge. One Friday in late March, as they were leaving the diner, Milo pointed to the old blue backpack still hanging on its hook near the door. "How come that one's still here?" he asked. "I have my new one now." Caleb looked at the faded bag, at the symbol of everything he'd carried for 3 years. "Because it reminds me of where we started, of the night your mom walked in and changed everything." "Can we bring it home?" Milo asked. "Put it somewhere safe?" Lena met Caleb's eyes, the question implicit. He thought about it, about letting go, about holding on, about the difference between honoring the past and being trapped by it. "Yeah," he said finally, "we can bring it home." They took it down together, the 3 of them, and Caleb found that it didn't hurt the way he expected. Instead, it felt like acknowledgement, like saying thank you to everything that had led him here, to this moment, to this family. At home, they hung the old backpack next to Milo's new one on hooks by the door, past and present, side by side. "Perfect," Milo declared, and ran off to play. Lena stepped close to Caleb, sliding her arms around his waist. "You okay?" "I'm more than okay. For 3 years I thought the best parts of my life were behind me, thought I was just marking time until I could see my son again." He pulled her closer. "But you and Milo, you reminded me that life keeps going, that there's room for new love even when you think you're all used up." "We didn't fix you," Lena said softly. "You're not a thing that needed fixing." "No, but you made me want to heal. That's different. That's everything." She kissed him then, and it tasted like home. The months that followed weren't perfect. Milo still had nightmares sometimes. Lena still flinched at unexpected sounds. And Caleb still visited Jamie's grave on the anniversary of the accident, bringing flowers and spending an hour telling his son about his life, about Lena and Milo, about the family that had found him in the wreckage. But those moments of pain existed alongside joy now, instead of being the only thing that existed. Milo's laughter, bright and frequent. Lena's singing while she cooked dinner, off-key and unself-conscious. The weight of Caleb waking up next to someone he loved. The simple peace of not being alone. In late summer, nearly a year after Lena had first walked into the diner, Caleb and Lena stood in a courthouse with Milo between them and a judge who smiled warmly. "It's not often I get to do the happy parts of this job," the judge said. "But today is definitely one of the happy ones." She signed the papers that made Milo legally Caleb's son through adoption, made official what had been true in every way that mattered for months. Afterward, they took Milo to get ice cream, and he proclaimed it the best day ever with his face covered in chocolate. That Friday, they went to the diner one more time. The same corner booth, 3 plates of meatloaf, just like always. But this time, when Caleb looked across the table, he didn't see an empty seat or a ghost of what he'd lost. He saw his wife because Lena had said yes when he'd asked, a quiet proposal in the shop with Milo as witness, and they'd gotten married at the courthouse with Marlene and a mechanic buddy as witnesses. He saw his son, not a replacement for Jamie, never that, but a boy who'd claimed a piece of Caleb's heart and filled spaces that had been dark for too long. And he saw a future that didn't feel like punishment or penance or just getting through another day. It felt like living. Milo was telling a story about something that happened at school, his hands waving for emphasis, and Lena was laughing, and Caleb felt something in his chest that he'd thought was broken forever settle into place. Not fixed, not erased, just balanced. The grief for his son would always be there. Some losses you didn't get over, you just learned to carry differently. But now the weight was distributed across shoulders that weren't alone anymore. Across a family that chose each other, that fought for each other, that showed up every single day. "Dad?" Milo said, and Caleb still felt the impact of that word every time. "Are you listening?" "Yeah, bud, I'm listening." I said, "Can we get dessert?" Lena raised an eyebrow. "You just ate a whole plate of meatloaf." "I know, but I'm growing. Mr. Chen at the hardware store said so." "Mr. Chen's not the boss of your stomach," Lena said, but she was smiling. Caleb flagged down Marlene. 3 slices of pie, whatever he wants." A 3? Marlene asked. 3, Caleb confirmed. "We're celebrating." "Celebrating what?" Caleb looked at his family, his wife, his son, the life they'd built from broken pieces and desperate hope. "Everything." Marlene brought the pie and they ate it while Milo narrated his plans for the weekend, which involved the bicycle and the park, and possibly learning to do a wheelie, even though Lena insisted he absolutely could not learn to do a wheelie until he was at least 10. The diner filled and emptied around them. People came and went. The town kept spinning its small-town rhythms. And in the corner booth by the window, a man who'd spent 3 years eating with ghosts sat with the people who'd taught him how to live again. The second plate wasn't empty anymore. And Caleb Hayes, mechanic and father and husband, discovered that sometimes the best thing you could do with grief was make room beside it for joy. Not instead of beside. Both things could be true. Both things could exist. And in that truth, in that balance, he finally found something that felt like peace. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. Inside, the diner was warm, and the booth was full, and the future stretched ahead like an open road. And for the first time in 3 years, Caleb was ready to see where it led.